Good afternoon and welcome to my humble model railway, Bedstead Junction. This afternoon we're going to be looking at tank engines, Great Western Railway tank engines. Now when we're thinking about what model railway locomotives to buy, we're very often thinking about the the Flying Scotsmans of this world, the Stars, the Castles, the Kings, the Coronations, Lord Nelsons, King Arthurs, all the big glamorous express locomotives. And what a lot of people tend to forget is about the humble little tank engines, which wended their way over branch lines, carrying passengers very often to their final destination after being delivered there by more glamorous express locomotives. Certainly the Southern Railway had a lot of branch lines running off of it, leading to seaside resorts, now sadly closed. And also the Great Western had quite a few branch lines leading to seaside resorts in various places. Again, under the Beeching Acts, a lot of these lines were closed, and with it went a lot of the work for these kinds of locomotives, and also of course steam came to an end. But what we're looking at now is a humble tank engine, and we'll have a look at the various types. There's 4 different types here actually, which had various uses around the Western Railway, the Great Western Railway. The one we're looking at now is called a pannier tank. It's called a pannier tank because of the way that the water tanks are slung either side of the boiler. So what would happen is that these would, as a consequence, have a shorter range than a tender style locomotive, where the water and the coal was carried separately in a tender behind the engine. So these would have had to have stopped more often at water towers and to get coal. And they were seen on all the local branch lines, doing either freight or passenger work. And in fact, in many ways, on some of the lines, they were preferred to some of the larger engines. You'll come across them quite often on preserved railways. I've been behind one of these before on the West Somerset Railway, behind the pannier tank engine, and it pulled very, very well. Okay, so that's what we can see going around the track now. And then in the station at the moment is a large prairie. I'll explain to you what a large prairie is. Now the pannier tank has got an 060 wheel configuration, which is no leading wheels, 6 driving wheels and no trailing wheels. And in fact, we're going to pull her over to have a quick look now, and we'll talk about the model itself, because obviously what we're looking at is a model. So there we are, there's a pannier tank. You can clearly see the 6 wheels underneath there, or at least one pair of the driving wheels. And there we are, a very, very nice locomotive, number 8743, one of the 57 XX class of pannier tanks there, in BR black with the late BR crest. Is putting a set of Great Western Chocolate and Cream coaches. And certainly for the Great Western, obviously you think of chocolate and cream coaches first of all. There were other colour coaches used, certainly when the Western region of British Rail was formed after nationalisation. But that there is a pannier tank. Now, the actual model itself was made by a company called Replica Railways, and they were very much the successors to Mainline. And in fact, this locomotive is very, very similar, if not the same, as the original Mainline locomotives, which were built by a company called Mainline up until 1984. I think this one came from the late 80s, late 1980s. I think I bought this one in the early 1990s, and I spent quite a long time up in the attic while my railway was in hibernation. and I brought everything down in time for the lockdown, as I've said in previous videos. and I'm glad I brought everything down now. There we are, so that's the pannier tank. And I'll just show you the box that with more cleaning. There we are, replica railways. You can always identify replica railways, their boxes are always green. And we'll just bring it around to the signal. And we'll be running her in. So there we are, an abrupt stop there at the station, up at the signal. And then we need to change the points. One of my schoolboy errors is not changing the points properly, and then watching a disaster unfold. That's happened before for me. There we go. There we go. How's that? Watch it going into the station there. There we are. You can clearly see now our GWR pannier tank. Certainly in BR day, in Western days, it would have almost certainly been green, but under BR they decided to paint a lot of the locomotives. If they weren't express locomotives, they painted them in black. And you can clearly see the lake crest there. Okay, so we're going to have a change of points now, and the next engine we're going to see is a large prairie, which we just saw waiting at the station. And again, we need a change of points. There we go. And just watch this one hopefully glide out of the station. There we are. How's that? There we are. And we just watch this one go around for a while. Now these were used more often on suburban services. They were seen quite a lot in London. Putting trains there. Let's just put my case to one side there for a second. There we are. Now called a large prairie. Now the wheel arrangement on this is 262, and again the water tanks are either side of the boiler. You can clearly see the bunker behind there with a coal in it. So again, these would have had a shorter range compared to a tender engine. And they were seen all over the GWR and then its successor, the Western Region of British Rail. And this model is by Hornby, and this was a long-running model. It originated back in the Airfix days. In fact, yes, I've got an Airfix locomotive where, apart from the colour, the body's almost identical. But Hornby gradually updated it, and they put a different motor in. This certainly runs a lot more quietly than the old Airfix model did. But the way that the body fits on the chassis is exactly the same. They've since updated this and made a later prairie tank, which is available, a large prairie. There's a lot more detail than this particular model. But this model here is quite heavy. I mean, it weighs as much as a tank. It's pulling 3 mainline coaches. Mainline or replica railways, again virtually the same company. I mean, what happened was when Palatoy stopped marketing under the mainline range, they stopped that for to produce Star Wars toys instead, and other what they perceived to be more profitable lines. The factory in Hong Kong wanted to continue building models, and they carried on briefly under replica railways, but then they decided to change the name to Bachmann, which is a name we'll be familiar with now. But these coaches, if you get them in either mainline or replica railways, and again they will be quite old when you get them, they're identical to each other, like for like. Now we'll have a quick look at this one in just a moment, and we'll just see what it's like close up. We'll take another look when it's in the station as well. Here we are, so we just put it by the line side, and there we are. It's what they call a prairie tank, and I think it's down to the wheel arrangement, which is 262. So we've got the 2 leading wheels, 6 driving wheels, and then a pair of driving wheels under the cab or under the bunker. And like I said, these were seen all over the Great Western. I've seen a picture of this one actually, one of these actually on the sea wall at Dawlish or at Teignmouth. There's a book called Great Western Steam in the West Country, which I can heartily recommend. And if I find the book, we'll have a quick look at it. Okay, so very quiet, this one, a very quiet runner, a very good steady runner, and a very strong puller as well. Again, I bought this one second hand during the lockdown. I think I paid about 50, maybe 60 quid for it, which may seem quite a lot for a second hand Hornby locomotive. But during the lockdown, I don't know if you've noticed and had a look, but prices appear to be going up, and the price of second-hand locomotives are commanding as much as what a new one would have done. So that's the way of the world. I guess a lot of people are getting into railways during the lockdown, or deciding to buy more locomotives to supplement their existing collections. I'm just going to take a walk over to the other station just a moment. Just bear with me just a moment. There we go. Right, now there's our other 2 locomotives there, which we'll have a look at in a moment. Just taking a crafty look over here. Here we go. You can see the bookcase there with all various things on there. I'm afraid I need to take those inhaler things at night. Yeah, there we go, that's another story. That's for allergies. Okay, Great Western Steam in the West Country. I hope the publishers don't mind me showing you this. There we are, one of those prairie tanks going down the track, 4117, along the seawall in Devon. There we are, with some happy people walking along, and it's got a mixture of coaches there. You see, there's the maroon coach, and then also behind it is a coach in blood and custard livery. Now that's a collaboration between Mike Arnott and David Lockett, and in fact the photographer is a gentleman called Norman Lockett, and I'd highly recommend that book. I thought I'd show you as a cover, because obviously I don't want to upset the publishers, but hopefully they don't mind me showing you this much of the book and giving it a wholehearted recommendation. Okay, so there we are, so we'll just bring that one in there, and we've got 2 more engines to look at this afternoon. Again, we're back on the station again. I don't know if you've seen this before, but there we are. That's our group of sailors going off to meet their ship. And that station is something I built in the middle of the 1990s. And we just put the points back onto the branch, or into the station, and in we go. There we are, so we're in now. Let's just make sure we've got enough room for a train to clear to come out. So I think we have. So now we need to change the points from this siding over to here. Now we're going to have a look at this locomotive, which is in the siding on the long platform without a shelter, and hopefully that will come out of the station and onto the main line. Here we go. Here it comes. There we go. Okay, so let's change the points once more. There we are. And we'll bring her around. There we are, on our way. Now this particular locomotive is interesting. Now this goes with a little bit of previous lack of knowledge of mine, and I'll explain to you what that is all about in a moment. Now this is a 262 Prairie tank locomotive. The one that you're looking at going around the track is an 062. I was thinking, well, an 062, is it just one of these with a front pair of wheels missing? No, it's a very, very different locomotive and built for a very, very different purpose. Whereas these were built for local and suburban services, these were built for the coalfields of Wales. They were built after Charles Benjamin Collett became the chief mechanical engineer of the Great Western Railway. Now it was a time when all the railways, there were loads and loads of little independent railways, especially in Wales, dotted around everywhere, and they were brought under the umbrella of 4 big companies. There was the Great Western, which is what we're looking at today, the Southern, the Midland, and the London and North Eastern Railway. So they were put into the big 4. Now what happened was that when these locomotives were looked at in Wales before the pre-grouping ones, a lot of them were in poor condition and they needed to be replaced, and so a large fleet of these were built to replace the existing engines which are going from places like coal mines and steelworks in South Wales. And the reason they were given an 062 arrangement, it was a very, very popular arrangement for the valleys in Wales. I think they would go up sort of Boiler first and come down the hill Bunker first, using the extra pair of wheels to help guide it down the hills. And what they would do is be carrying the coal from coal mines down to the docks and down to mainline stations where the coal could be taken away to the various destinations. Now, when the coal fields began to decline a little bit in Wales, which unfortunately they did, excuse me, then these engines were put onto passenger duties, and that's what this one's doing here now. Pulling a couple of Great Western coaches. It would have been capable of pulling much more than this, more coaches than this. This may be how it would have been on one of the branches. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to pull this one in. In fact, I wish I would have put the two side by side and put the Welsh engine next to this one, that we can have directly compare them side by side. What we'll do is we'll bring this one round and we'll have a look and we'll see the differences. Right, put in here. 062, you see there's no leading wheels. We can clearly see there's a pair of training wheels. They were made especially for the very, very winding railway lines which existed in South Wales. They were given a nickname of taffy tanks. Now, some people, sort of, if they're thinking negatively, might say sort of taffy is a kind of a derogatory term. But a lot of Welsh people don't mind being called Taffy. In fact, my grandfather's nickname was Taffy. And he was from Wales, from Pontypridd, as far as I know. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was quite young, so I didn't get to know him very well. But I heard lots about him, but his name was Taffy, or nickname was. And you can see his Great Western Railway there. And you can see possibly the difference is, I'm not trying to get too technical and boring, these had sort of inside steam pipes and cylinders. Okay, so you can see there's no cylinders showing on the outside, whereas these did have outside cylinders and outside steam pipes. So they're two very, very different locomotives. Apparently quite popular with their crews when they were introduced. So I got a bit of a frog in my throat today. Okay, so that's the 062 tank engine. Now, what these would like I said, would generally hold coal trains, and then sort of passenger trains when vacancies came up from them on passenger lines. Now the model itself is made by a company called Mainline. You've probably seen me with my Mainline ones before. This one needed a fair amount of work to get it running properly. I had to completely dismantle it and clean the motor. The motor, it was running when I bought it, but the motor was in very, very sort of unclean condition. It was all black inside. As you can see now, I haven't given it a clean. It runs well. Again, it sounds a little bit similar to the replica railway's pannier tank there, because their mechanism is virtually identical. The gearing's different between the motor and the wheels, but they've got very similar motors and very similar construction. They're called split chassis. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to run this one into the station. I'll be having a look at the last sort of tank engine of the Great Western Railway. I say today we've not got any of the glamorous fast express engines. These were the workhorses of the railway. And in many ways they earned a lot of revenue for the railway as well. So here we go, we're going to go into the station now. There we are, that's perfect. We're just changing the points for the last one. And here's our 14XX 042 tank. Again, everything's self-contained within the locomotive, so the water and the coal is all carried within the locomotive itself, and it's with an auto coach. Now both the items here are both made by a company called Dapol. And Dapol still making locomotives today. In fact, they've got a mogul out at the moment, which sort of got me interested. But I've already got a couple of moguls in my fleet, which are mainline ones. Now, some people say these Dapol ones are better than the later Hornbys. I've not tried any Hornby 14XX tanks to compare. Now, some of you may shout out that is running backwards, and yes it is, but it's supposed to. They were meant to run in either direction. And in fact the driver, in this particular formation, the driver is in the far end of the cab, and he's driving the locomotive from the end where you can see the bell, and the fireman remains in the locomotive, and they communicate with a series of rods and levers. And these were seen on branch lines. They were seen locally in my kind of area at Clevedon. I live in Kingston, but Clevedon where they could be seen, running between Yatton and Clevedon. And they ran right up until 1960, when diesel engines took over, and then the diesel multiple units only had a very, very short period of time before Dr. Beeching came along and closed the whole thing down anyway, which is rather sad. I think it's junction 20, I think it is, for Clevedon now. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. Of the motorway. And if you want to go from Yatton, there is still a station at Yatton, but the branch lines that went away from it, that was the one to Clevedon and the Strawberry line going to Cheddar and Wells, they're long closed. And we'll take a closer look at her. There she is. Look at that. Dapple. 042. You can clearly see the no leading wheels, 4 driving wheels, then a set of training wheels under the cab. Again, very sort of family resemblance to other Great Western locomotives. And I do believe that one of these was actually used in the film The Titfield Thunderbolt, which is was made, I believe, on the Liberty Stoke to Camerton line. It was about the film itself, The Titfield Thunderbolt. If you get a chance to see it, it probably inspired a lot of people to have a go at railway preservation. It's an evening comedy, but effectively a group of locals actually managed to save their local branch line from closure. Unfortunately, in reality though, the Liberty Stoke to Camerton branch closed many years ago. I mean, nowadays they're talking about reopening a lot of railway lines, and locally to me there's talk of reopening the railway station at Salford, but they're saying that that's 10 years away. 10 years away. Probably the consultants are going to be taking 9 3/4 years, and then the poor old workers will go out there and do it all in a couple of months. But that's the way of the world, I suppose. When you bear in mind that the whole of the Somerset and Dorset line between Bath and Evercreech Junction was built over 2 years in 1874, and then they're talking about, and was tunnels, viaducts, embankments galore to get that railway built, and now they're talking about over 10 years to open up a railway station. Why? If somebody can tell me why, please let me know. Okay, so that's our 042 tank, and that's where we're going to end things now. Now, so say on a brighter note, they are reopening a lot of railway stations, and there's talk of reopening the Portishead branch, which was closed in the 1960s. So the future for rail seems to be a little bit brighter than the dark days of the Beeching Acts. I don't blame Dr. Beeching in particular, because he was just given a job to do, which was to try and cut the losses, stem the losses of British Railways, and it was thought that if you close all the lines that were perceived to be uneconomical, you could be left with all the profitable bits. But I think the losses carried on. So I think some of the closures by Dr. Beeching have been reversed. Some of them have been reversed by the building, by the revitalisation of branch lines. And in fact, if the Beeching Acts hadn't taken place and steam hadn't have been ended in 1965 on the Great Western region, then probably there would be no preserved lines or locomotives preserved. I think probably the lines would have probably slowly closed one by one, and the locomotives would have disappeared without any form of acknowledgement or fanfare. And suddenly they would have found, you know, the last of whole swathes of locomotives just gradually disappeared one by one. And what this meant was that a lot of locomotives were available for preservation, and lines were available for reopening by preservation societies. Okay, so that's a brighter note at least. And I'm going to bid you farewell now because it's running to 31 minutes. Thank you very much for watching, and if you like what you see, click on like, subscribe, and ring that little alarm bell that's there, and you'll be made aware of new videos. I did a video, I don't know if any of you've seen it, which was in relation to Churchward locomotives. Please forgive me if that was a little dark. I tried using my camera for that rather than my phone, and what I would say is, and as a keen photographer it pains me to say it, but this phone has given me far better results. Okay, so if you're wondering what I'm using to film this this with right now, I'm using a 4-year-old Sony Android phone, pure and simple, and in HD. I'm not in 4K, just in simple 1080p. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. Thank you, and bye bye. Thank you.